We spend our lives running from our wounds, trying to hide them, numb them, or pretend they never happened. But what if the very things you're most ashamed of hold the key to your greatest strength? Your wounds are not weaknesses. They're unprocessed stories, frozen emotions, and suppressed truths waiting to be transformed. Carl Jung believed that the path to wholeness isn't found in avoiding pain, but in turning toward it with courage. Because when you dare to heal, you don't just feel better, you become better. You reclaim the parts of yourself you abandoned. You grow empathy, insight, and resilience that can't be taught any other way. This is not self-help fluff, this is soul work. Your pain has shaped you, yes, but healing it can awaken a power within you that changes not just your story, but how you show up in the world. Pain has a way of stopping us in our tracks. It forces us to pay attention, to feel, to confront what we've tried to suppress. But what if pain wasn't just something to escape from? What if it was a hidden guide pointing you toward your true calling? Most people misunderstand pain as a sign that something is wrong with them. They believe it makes them broken or unworthy. But the truth is, your deepest wounds often carry the very clues to your highest purpose. Carl Jung taught that the path to individuation, the realization of the self, always runs through the territory of suffering. Because pain exposes what matters to you, it cracks open the surface of your life and forces a deeper conversation with your soul. Think about the things that have hurt you the most. The rejections, the losses, the betrayals. These are not random events, they are chapters in your personal myth. And inside those chapters are themes, emotional patterns, unresolved conflicts, unmet needs that continue to shape your behavior today. When you finally stop running and begin to explore your pain, you'll notice something powerful. It's not just pointing to what hurt you, it's pointing to what you care about most. The person who felt abandoned may one day become the one who creates spaces of belonging for others. The child who was silenced may grow into the adult who gives voice to difficult truths. The person who lived through emotional neglect might become someone deeply attuned to the feelings of others. These are not coincidences. These are transformations, wounds that have become gifts through the process of conscious healing. But the transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires intention. It requires the willingness to enter the pain and ask, what is this trying to teach me about myself? What is this pushing me to become? People often want to discover their purpose through clarity, inspiration, or spiritual insight. And while those things have value, they usually come after we've confronted our suffering, not before. In fact, many people spend years searching for purpose while avoiding the one place it's hiding in the shadows of their past. This avoidance creates a loop, chasing meaning without ever confronting the very pain that contains it. Purpose is not about becoming something you're not, it's about remembering who you already are, and pain is the mirror that reflects back what you've been afraid to see. This doesn't mean glorifying pain or seeking it out. It means honoring it for what it truly is, a sacred signal from your unconscious, begging you to become whole. When you approach pain with curiosity instead of fear, it stops being the enemy, it becomes a doorway, and through that doorway, you find fragments of yourself you thought were lost. Your voice, your sensitivity, your drive to protect, your hunger for truth, all of it returns, not in spite of your pain, but because of it. Your purpose isn't out there waiting to be found, it's in you, buried beneath the pain you've been avoiding. And here's the real paradox. Once you begin to do the inner work, you realize that your pain wasn't trying to destroy you, it was trying to wake you up, to shake you free from illusions, to pull you away from the life you thought you should live and guide you toward the one your soul was born for. Every time you move closer to your wound with compassion instead of judgment, you uncover another layer of your purpose. That's why people who have been through deep suffering often carry a kind of gravity and presence that can't be faked. They've earned their wisdom not from books or lectures but from wrestling with themselves and surviving. And it's this inner work that gives them the ability to impact others, not as experts but as examples of what's possible when you turn pain into power. So if you're still asking, what's my purpose? Start with your pain, trace it back to its source, sit with the feelings it brings up, get honest about the parts of yourself you've disowned to survive. Because somewhere inside that wound is a message, a direction, a mission, and it won't stop calling you until you answer. Avoidance feels safe. It's the mind's attempt to protect you from feeling too much too fast. So instead of turning toward the wound, you distract yourself. You overwork, you overthink, you overplease, you numb out with screens or stay stuck in cycles of perfectionism and self-blame. But the truth is, every time you avoid your wounds, you also hand over your power, because what you refuse to face begins to control you from the shadows. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you avoid pain, you're not getting rid of it. You're just relocating it. It doesn't vanish, it mutates. It becomes self-doubt, sabotage, anxiety, addiction, chronic overthinking. It seeps into your relationships, your choices, your confidence. You may think you're escaping discomfort, but really you're reinforcing the walls that keep your power locked away. Avoidance teaches the nervous system that you're not strong enough to handle what's inside you. And over time you start to believe that lie. You confuse numbness with peace, suppression with strength. You build an identity around keeping it all together. but deep down you feel disconnected, reactive, uncertain. That's the cost of avoidance, not just emotional pain but disconnection from your true self. When you avoid your wounds, you also avoid the growth they were meant to activate. That heartbreak, it was trying to teach you boundaries. That betrayal, it was calling you toward discernment. That childhood neglect, it was shaping your capacity for empathy, not as a curse but as a gift you've yet to claim. But none of that happens if you keep running, because healing only begins where avoidance ends. And here's the paradox. The longer you avoid the pain, the scarier it becomes. Not because the pain grows, but because your story about it does. You start to believe facing it will break you, that if you stop distracting yourself, the emotions will consume you. But feelings are like waves. They rise, peak and pass. It's your resistance that gives them weight, your fear of them that keeps you trapped. Think about how much energy it takes to keep your wounds buried, to maintain the masks, to control how others see you. All that effort could be used to actually heal, but instead it's being used to hide, and that's why avoidance breeds exhaustion. You're not living in alignment, you're living in defense. Facing your wounds isn't about wallowing or blaming the past, it's about reclaiming your agency. It's about saying, this happened to me but it doesn't get to define me anymore. You can't rewrite your history, but you can rewire how it lives inside you, and that begins the moment you stop running from your pain and start listening to it. There's a part of you that already knows where the wound is. You feel it in the tension in your chest when certain topics come up, in the way you overreact to small things, in the shame that surfaces when you're alone. These are not random, they're signals, invitations, and if you ignore them, life will keep repeating the same patterns until you finally turn inward. Healing takes courage, but it also gives you something avoidance never can: freedom. When you face the wound, you stop being ruled by it. You stop reacting from old survival patterns. You stop needing others to fix or validate you. You stand in your own truth, raw and real. And in that space, power returns, not as control, but as clarity, as presence, as the ability to choose your life, not just cope with it. You can't become whole by skipping the parts that hurt. You have to gather them, listen to them, hold space for them, because each avoided wound holds a piece of your power, a piece of your story that, when embraced, makes you more human, more grounded, more alive. Avoidance keeps you stuck in cycles. Presence breaks them. So if you feel powerless, don't ask what's missing. Ask what you're still running from. That's where your power is waiting. Not in becoming someone new, but in finally being willing to face who you've always been. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. That's the brutal truth most people try to sidestep with spiritual bypassing, endless distractions or surface-level positivity. But real transformation demands you go inward. Not around the pain, not above it, not under it, but straight through it. What you've buried inside, the grief, the shame, the fear, the unmet needs, they're not gone just because you've ignored them. They're still alive, shaping your behavior from the depths. And until you feel them, you'll stay stuck in loops that make no logical sense. Many people ask, why do I keep sabotaging myself? Or why do I always attract the same kind of pain? The answer is buried emotion. Buried emotion isn't passive. It's not sitting silently inside you. It's active. It leaks out in your reactions, your patterns, your relationships, your anxiety, your compulsions. What you haven't felt, you haven't integrated, and what you haven't integrated controls you. Carl Jung spoke often about the necessity of facing the unconscious, because anything in you that remains unconscious, especially unprocessed emotion, will project itself outward and feel like fate. That anger you swallowed as a child, it may now show up as passive aggressiveness or self-criticism. That sadness you were never allowed to express, it may now manifest as numbness, disconnection, or even depression. These are symptoms, not flaws. They're signals of what hasn't been felt. Most people carry emotional wounds like ghosts in the basement. They keep the house clean upstairs, smiling, working, achieving, while suppressing the chaos that lives underneath. But eventually what you suppress starts leaking into your life. The basement floods. The emotions you never wanted to deal with start disrupting your peace, your relationships, your sense of self. And that's the turning point. You either feel what you've buried, or you keep reliving it through suffering. Feeling your buried pain doesn't mean becoming a victim to it. It means giving it a voice, giving it breath. It means letting that inner child grieve what they never got to grieve, letting the teenage version of you rage at the injustice, letting the adult you sit with the fear, the disappointment, the heartbreak, without judging it, rushing it, or numbing it, because only what's felt fully can be released fully. This is not easy work. It's why most people avoid it. We've been taught to fear big emotions. We label them as weakness or worse, as irrational. But emotional suppression is not strength, it's survival. And survival isn't the same as healing. Healing asks for your honesty. It asks you to stop performing and start listening. It asks you to make space for the pain you once had no space to feel. The truth is, emotions are not dangerous. They're messengers. They're trying to bring you back to wholeness. Grief shows you what mattered. Anger shows you where your boundaries were violated. Fear shows you what still feels unsafe. These feelings don't make you broken. They make you real. And the more you allow them to move through you, the more you reclaim your inner authority. When you finally let yourself feel what you've buried, it won't destroy you, it will dissolve you. Not in a violent way, but in a liberating one. The false self you've been carrying, the mask, the defense mechanisms, the persona, begins to fall away, and underneath you find something deeper, the you that's been waiting. The you that doesn't need to pretend, perform, or prove anything. The you that knows how to live, not just survive. Emotional release can come in unexpected ways. Tears out of nowhere, shaking, rage, stillness, sudden clarity. These are signs your body is letting go of what it's held for years. Don't rush it, don't judge it, let it rise, let it pass, let it teach you. Every buried emotion you feel is like unlocking a frozen part of your life force, and the more you thaw, the more whole you become. Healing isn't a light switch, it's a process of remembering what you've pushed away, of allowing old wounds to speak their truth. And yes, it's painful, but so is living a life that isn't yours. So is pretending to be fine when you're crumbling inside. So is being numb to joy because you're so scared of feeling grief. There is nothing wrong with you for carrying pain. There is something courageous about turning toward it. Every time you sit with what you once buried, you reclaim a piece of yourself, and over time the pain becomes wisdom, the wounds become teachers, and the emotions become bridges, not barriers to your deeper self. True healing begins there, not in perfection, not in pretending, but in feeling what you were once too afraid to face. Most people walk through life unaware that the very qualities they suppress are the key to their power. From a young age you were taught directly or indirectly what parts of you were acceptable, and what parts were too much, too weak, or too different. Maybe your sensitivity was labeled as weakness. Maybe your anger was punished. Maybe your creativity was dismissed. So you learned to hide those parts. You buried them deep to earn love, safety, or approval. But in doing so you didn't just hide flaws, you hid your gifts. Carl Jung called these disowned aspects the shadow. But the shadow isn't just darkness. It's potential trapped behind shame. It's your brilliance, your intuition, your inner fire, all wrapped in fear and judgment. And the more you reject these parts, the more distant you become from your authenticity. Your life starts feeling flat, disconnected, like something essential is missing, but you can't name what. You don't become whole by chasing perfection. You become whole by turning toward what you've abandoned. That part of you that always spoke the truth, even when it made others uncomfortable, there's your voice. That part of you that felt everything deeply and cried easily, there's your empathy and emotional intelligence. That part of you that defied rules and questioned everything, that's your inner rebel, the one who can lead with originality and courage. These aren't flaws, these are fragments of your genius. But reclaiming them isn't automatic, it's painful, because before you can own a hidden gift, you have to face the wound that made you reject it. Maybe you were shamed for being too loud, too opinionated, too ambitious, so you toned yourself down, became small, agreeable, invisible. You adapted to survive. But survival isn't the same as self-expression. And now, every time you try to step into your power, that inner rejection flares up again. Don't be too much. Don't shine too bright. Don't speak unless you're sure. This is the echo of the past keeping you from your future. Healing this means rewriting the story. It means realizing that what you rejected wasn't wrong. It just wasn't safe to express back then. But you're not back then. You're here now, and you have the power to create safety for those parts, to listen to the voice you silenced, to allow the fire you tried to contain, to love the vulnerability you once hid. This is what integration looks like, not fixing yourself but reclaiming what was never broken in the first place. Most people chase success or peace by trying to get rid of what feels messy inside, but that's backwards. The clarity, purpose, and confidence you want live underneath that mess. You don't need to be someone else. You need to become more of who you already are, especially the parts you've rejected. That's where the gold is. Jung famously said, "The gold is in the dark." He meant that your inner treasures are hidden exactly where you're most afraid to look. Start paying attention to what triggers you, what makes you jealous, angry, ashamed. These reactions aren't random. They point to something in you that wants to be acknowledged. Maybe you envy someone who speaks boldly because you silenced yourself. Maybe you judge someone's sensitivity because you weren't allowed to be vulnerable. In every projection there's a reflection, and in every reflection there's a doorway back to a part of yourself. The truth is, wholeness doesn't feel like perfection. It feels like permission. Permission to be fully human, to feel, to struggle, to shine, to stumble. And in that permission, your gifts return. They don't come back all at once. Sometimes they emerge quietly, a forgotten talent, a sudden surge of courage, a creative spark you hadn't felt in years. Other times, they come through crisis, breakdown, or intense emotion. But however they arrive, they always carry the same message. This is you. You buried me, but I never left. You don't need to wait for confidence to reclaim these parts. You need courage. Confidence comes after the integration, not before. And every time you choose to honor what you once rejected, you take back a piece of your soul. You become more real, more grounded, more alive. Your life begins to reflect your truth, not the version of you the world told you to become, but the version you were always meant to be. So ask yourself, What part of me have I rejected that might actually be a strength? Where am I still hiding to feel safe? And what might happen if I welcomed that part back with compassion instead of shame? Your healing isn't about fixing your flaws, it's about reclaiming your fullness. Because the power you're searching for isn't out there, it's hidden behind the very parts of you you've been taught to fear. And when you dare to embrace them, you don't just heal, you become unstoppable.